welcome, and we're in Tractate excuse me, Parsha Kedoshim. I will tell you that whenever I get to these particular parts of the Torah, I always think of my late father, who was a rabbi, and he loved he loved Parshat Kedoshim, and he loved this particular section of Kedoshim. You'll see, it's really amazing. So, without further ado, as they say, we'll make a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So, we were talking, the previous verse, right, 33, was talking about not wronging a stranger. In other words, a non-Israelite, right? If a non-Israelite resides with you, right? Lo tonu oto, right? Lord, you shall not wrong or abuse him. And Rashi explains that this particular abuse is verbal abuse, saying, oh, before you were an idolater, but now you're coming to worship the true God, that kind of sarcasm, right? Okay. Anyway, going on with this, it doesn't just, it's not only the negative side. Ke'ezrach mikem yelachem hager hagaritchem. As a citizen among you shall be for you the stranger who resides with you. Wow. Talk about a statement that opens up towards non-Jews, non-Israelites, and not to make them second-class citizens. It says, right, Yeh lachem hager, right, ke'ezrach mikem, right? It makes it very clear, not a second-class citizen. And not only that, look at this, va'ahavta lo kamocha. You shall love him as yourselves. What a great statement. Again, the problem is that the Torah stays in heaven too long and we don't bring it down here, right? And not only that, the Torah backs it up with another statement which Rashi is going to amplify and explain the logic behind this. It says, for you were strangers, right? You were Gerim, Hayitem, Be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. You know what it's like. And by the way, that sentiment is mentioned more than once, right? You should know what it feels like. And if you know what it feels like, don't do it to anyone else. Ani Hashem Elokechem. I, the Lord, am your God. Elohechem, your God, all of you. All of you. Now, let's take a look at the Rashi. Love this stuff. It's inspirational. Ki gerim hayitim. So he just says, you were gerim. Mum shebecha, the defect in you, al tomar lachavercha. Don't talk to your friend about the very defect that you have. So you want to call them gerim? Well, guess what? You were gerim yourselves. Don't talk that way, right? Don't even think that way. Ani Hashem Elokechem. I, the Lord, am your God. Look at this. Elohecha ve'Elohav ani. Your God and his God. So that the Elohechem, your God, plural, referring to the Israelites and the Gerim. I, the Lord, I'm your God and I'm his God too. If I needed a verse to back up some of the stuff that I like to preach, here we got it. Right there. Now, look at how it goes on, how this stuff is like foundational. Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat. Do not perform perversity in judgment. And Rashi's going to explain that mishpat here is not talking about the legal system, which is so interesting. This is the sort of mind-blowing element of what we're doing, right? You shall not pervert judgment. Bamida, in length, bamishkal, in weight, uvamsora, and in volume, in capacity. Right? The division of weights and measures. It's sadly, look at how far back this goes in terms of human nature. To cheat to cheat in these particular ways, right? So you can make more, but in this sort of cheating kind of way, and a way that intentionally misleads people. Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat. You shall not practice perversity in judgment. Im ladin, but if you want to say, well, is this talking about the judicial system, right, in courts, etc.? Hare kvar ne'emar. We already have a verse that has said exactly this. Lo tasu avel b'mishpat. So we have another verse that already says it. It doesn't need to be repetitive. The Torah just needs to say it once. Umahu mishpat hashanui kan. So what is this mishpat? What is this judgment that is being taught here? Hi hamidah, it's referring to measurement, right? It's talking about mishkal, it's talking about weights, vahamsorah, and capacity, volume. Melamed. And what does this teach? Why does the Torah state it that way? Melamed, it teaches you, shehamoded, that one who measures, right, who's measuring out things, nikra dayan, he is called a judge. That when we measure, we are in fact acting as judges. Because we know that it is through those measures that in fact we can charge legitimately and fairly, right? And sadly, I see evidence around here where people are just saying, well, they can afford that, so I can charge them that. It's the think system. And it's not the way to do business, right? It's perverse. And here going on, what's the strength of this? She'im shikir bamidah, because if he falsifies in measurement, it is tantamount to ruining judgment, right? Spoiling judgment, perverting judgment. The karui, and such a person is called aval, a corrupter, sanui, hated, umishukatz, and detestable, charem, or charam, and I have a note, here we go, this moved upwards, I'm sorry. Safaria translates that as doomed to destruction. So we know that that cherem, the charim, has to do with destroying stuff. Okay, the to'eva, and an abomination, disgusting. The gorim, and not only that. Okay, not only is such a person to be described in their behavior, to be described in this particular way. The gorim l'chamisha dvarim. He causes 5 different things, umurim pedayan, which are mentioned regarding a corrupt judge. Metame et haaretz, he defiles the land. Umechalel et Hashem, he profanes the name of God. Umesalek et hashchina, he causes the divine presence to remove itself. Umapil et Yisrael b'cherev, he causes the Israelites to be thrown down, to fall by the sword. Umagale otam me'atzam, and in the final analysis, he causes them to be exiled from their land. You know, you stand back and you look at this, and you see how profound these words really are in terms of a society and a just society. That justice isn't just about what goes on in the courts. It goes on in daily business. B'midah. So he's explaining the word midah. Zo midat haaretz. This has to do with the measurement of land. And this is simply a citation of where this is based in Baba Metzia, page 61, Baba Batra, page 29. Bamishkal, weight, kamashma, or just the way it sounds. It's got to do with weights. Uvam surah, and he midat halach, that has to do with liquid measure. So And this is something, again, these verses were favorites of my dad. Moznei tzedek, honest scales, avnei tzedek, honest weights, efat tzedek, and ephah is a measurement of volume, right, of dry volume. Vehin tzedek, that's a measurement of liquid volume. Hin tzedek, accurate, right? Yelachem shall be to you. So the fact that it's sort of got this in this passive voice actually strengthens its saying, how this occurs under all circumstances. Ani Hashem Elokechem, I, the Lord, am your God, Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Again, that is why ultimately God has a right to demand these things of us, and for us to realize that when we don't, right, in a way, we are saying we didn't deserve to come out of Egyptian bondage. And of course, that whole idea that's mentioned in the Haggadah, that had God not done it so many hundreds of generations before, if that had never happened, we'd still be slaves in the land of Egypt. And then, if you want to speak metaphorically, you can say, when you wind up doing these kinds of things, guess what? You wind up back in the land of Egypt, spiritually. So, let's go here. Let's see. Okay. Avnei tzedek, right? I said, literally it means stones, just stones, honest stones, or stones of righteousness, right? But righteousness has to do with just. Heim hamishkolot, that refers to the weights, shoklim kenegdam, against which one weighs. Ephah, hi midat hayavesh. Ephah is the measurement of dry, it's a dry measure. In zohi midat halach, and he says in, that is a liquid measure. Asher hotzeti etchem. So remember, we've had this Ani Adonai Elohechem. We've had that several times across many of the laws that have been mentioned here. But so what's the significance that in this particular case, it says that who brought you out, etc. Almanatchem, for this very purpose. In other words, for the very purpose of a just society and an honest business dealings. Davar acher, another interpretation. Ani hivchanti b'Mitzrayim, I was able to distinguish in Egypt bein tipa shel bachor, between the drop of who was a firstborn, referring, of course, to the semen. Okay, in other words, what child was a bachor, the firstborn? The tipa shel eina shel bachor, to the semen that was of one who was not the firstborn. In other words, the degree to which God is able to distinguish. And of course, we know that it was the slaying of the firstborn that ultimately caused the Israelites to leave Egypt, for the Egyptians to let them go. V'ani hane'eman, and likewise, just as I could tell the difference, I can be relied on, lehi para, to avenge mimi shetomin mishkelotav b'melach, one who dips his weights in salt, lehonot et habriot, in order to defraud people, right? She'ein makirim b'him, who wouldn't be able to distinguish that. They wouldn't be able to tell that you had dipped them in salt. I assume that the salt acts as a sort of an acid and wears away the weight, and I think that was the idea, that you take them and you can't really tell the difference. Last verse for today. Ushmartem et kol chukotai, and you shall guard all my chukot. Chukim are, remember, are laws that seem arbitrary, right? They're simply there because God gave them. We do them because God commanded them. Ve'et kol mishpatai, and all my, can translate it as ordinances, but here we're talking about laws such as the ones we just had that are the very basis of a just society. V'asitem otam, and you shall perform them. So lishmor means you need to learn them, right? So that you know about them, you're aware of them. V'asitem otam, so that you practice them. Ani Hashem, I, the Lord. And this is one of the reasons why Talmud Torah is so important, because if you don't study Torah, you're not going to know about these things, or at least you're not going to know how important they are and how fundamental they are. And I'm going to stop our study of the passages today with this and open it up to any thoughts or comments you want to make. But I think it's really, really interesting as a commentary of today's society. Meneer Skellinger, what would you like to tell me?
Yeah, just as far as the Israelites being it was kind of a process. Actually, from Abraham, then you could say it started there. But they were a tribe, but I guess they weren't under Torah. So they're described as still Ger that much later.
Yes, in a sense, right? Of course, the book of Genesis tries to describe the character of Abraham and the level of righteousness, and the fact that the reason why he was so beloved of God was his righteous behavior. And what a lovely concept for us to guard, to know that we are beloved to the degree that we practice acts of righteousness. And in some ways, what a sad commentary it is to look at society and see the lack of righteousness that goes on in society. So, there's in Deuteronomy, it talks about the king having to have study a Sefer Torah, day and night, to remind him that he's not God. And we have these people who think of themselves as divine. As I said, I'm reading about Mussolini, who, of course, before his army started to, the Italian army just was destroyed, right? And on the other hand, the German army was so successful, it changed the relationship of Hitler and Mussolini, because to begin with, Hitler considered Mussolini his idol, so to speak. Yeah. But still, all of it is so sad, ugly. Yeah. We have the tools. The question is whether we want to use the tools. Any other comments? Golda, you haven't been with us for a while. What's your thoughts here? Let me pick on you.
There's nothing. I don't have any thoughts. I mean,
Okay.
what we just did is it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
We should all be good with weights and measures and how we measure each other, and also and be fair.
Well, this is why you have that little sticker on all the gas pumps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess why? Guess why? Yes. The old story. Okay. I will stop the recording. No other comments before we stop? All right.
Yeah, I have one.
Good. Go for it.
Okay. Today, what's going on today is terrible. We have misinformation, propaganda, slander, gossip. It's getting worse. Crime is getting worse. And it's terrible here in the United States. With anti-Semitism, even more worse. I mean, God gave us this Torah, but the people just don't care. I don't know what's going on.
Yep. What can I say, Harlan? It's not I'm not going to talk about the good old days because they never existed. Okay. It's an ongoing challenge. It really is. So.
And I want to ask about it. The Torah says, "Love your mother and father." Well, what if your father and mother want you to be something and you don't want to be what they want to be? You want to be on your own. I mean, your daddy wants you to be a lawyer because he's a lawyer. Well, I don't want to be a lawyer, and then you're against your father. I mean, I don't get it. There's
I don't,
got, as
I
long
don't
as
think
you're
so.
nice to
But
them, of course.
okay,
Good parents want you to be you. So the parents need to learn how to accept you as you are.
Some don't, some do.
Some are good parents and some aren't.
but you know, people who have good parents sometimes turn out not so good, and people who don't have good parents sometimes turn out to be very righteous. You just never.
That's true.
This is an old thing. And by the way, the whole issue of what actually is involved in honoring your father and mother, or you know, that is discussed. There's a tractate in the Talmud where this is discussed in detail, to what degree and what we're talking about. But you know, I think that, you know, obviously God is ultimately the judge, but not following your father's career path isn't necessarily a rebellious, you know, response at all. There's certainly ways to disagree without being, you know, rude or disrespectful. But it is a difficult thing, Harlan, and you're right. Sadly, there are many stories that go along those lines. So I'm going to stop the recording here.